Hello, I'm Swerve from Custom Service, and I collect speed equipment for the Kaiser and for the Willys Jeep, which have the 226 cubic inch flathead 6-cylinder. There's a lot of equipment out there which you may not be aware of, and maybe you are. Maybe this will be boring for you, but I've got a few pieces to show you, and hopefully it'll be interesting. The Continental 226 L-head motor was actually made by Continental Motors, and it was used in a lot of applications. It was used in Grand Page, Fraser, Kaiser, Willys, Willys Jeep, Checker, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some. It was also used in industrial applications. I have a nice electronic distributor to show you later. They actually came out of a portable air compressor that was used for sandblasting at work sites. So anyway, in a moment I'll start off with the McCulloch supercharger. I've got it, as you can see in front here. I'll start with that in just a moment, and I'll be back and I'll show you the different pieces. So this is a McCulloch supercharger. It is probably the easiest piece you're going to find that you can mount onto your 226 flathead 6-cylinder, and it looks really cool. They could be a little expensive, especially if you want to get a rebuilt one, or I've even seen new old stock ones for sale on eBay. So I'll tell you a little bit about this. This is a Kaiser model. It should be a VS57 model. It says Kaiser on it. It has a variable pulley. I'm going to go with VS57 for the moment. I could be wrong. There are a lot of little variations over the years. As McCulloch went from McCulloch and then into Paxton, they lived, same company, changed names later on in time. So this particular unit came from the factory on the 1954 and 1955 Kaiser Manhattans. Kaiser wanted more horsepower for their flathead 6-cylinder. They were trying to develop a V8, but it just didn't happen in time, and they eventually went out of business. Last passenger cars Kaiser produced in the U.S., I believe, was 1955, before they moved all of the tooling offshore down to South America. Either Argentina or Brazil, or both, got all the tooling, and continued making cars for Kaiser based right up into the 60s. Some neat stuff down in South America if you look around. In fact, I've got a piece of speed equipment from South America I'm going to show you later on in the video. So Kaiser wanted more horsepower on their flathead 226. They were producing about 118 horsepower according to the different manuals I read, Kaiser literature and what have you, encyclopedia of cars and such, without the supercharger. And when they installed the supercharger, it put in about 7 psi boost when it was engaged, and it would develop about 140 horsepower. Seems a little high to me, but that was probably best case scenario. I had a 1960 Willys Jeep 4-wheel drive sedan delivery, which I completely restored, but I didn't do it 100% original. Under the hood, I wanted toys. I wanted interesting head-scratching speed equipment. And I started off with some of the other items I'll show you, but I started off with a McCulloch supercharger, and I had it on the truck, and I probably, I'm telling you I had it on the truck, but I never actually put a drive belt to it. The motor ran so sweet without the supercharger, I just didn't bother. But I could have popped it on anytime I wanted to. If I was at a show, I could pop it on and make the supercharger whine a little bit if somebody was interested. But I didn't even drive it with a supercharger. I just had everything on there, and it looked cool, and if I needed it, I could put a belt on. So, good choice, easy to find, relatively easy to find compared to some of the other stuff I'm going to show you. I've got some stuff here which is really hard to find. And I'll get to those in a moment. But as you can see, coming from Kaiser, it had a Kaiser on the badge. I don't know if you can see that good. I'm going to bring that up like this. So this badge comes off with 2 screws. And they made another badge, a generic McCulloch badge. I'm going to bring that up so you can see it. Now I think somebody clever that does 3D printing could reproduce these and put any name in there you want. You could have Willys, you could have Jeep. If you've got a Checker that's got a 226, you want to put a supercharger on, you could put Checker in there. It'd be kind of cool. In fact, if any of you out there decide to do this, to buy one of these and generate them with different names, let me know. I'd be interested in buying a few with a couple different names. So one of the ways the way this works, the supercharger, it's got a variable pulley. This pulley goes in and out according to the solenoid actually being activated electronically from a switch. The switch is usually in the in the throttle linkage, but you could actually hook it up to a toggle switch right on your dashboard if you wanted to. You could do a momentary contact and get your Mad Max temporary boost, pop it off again, or you could switch it on with a toggle switch and turn it off when you don't want it. So this is a good choice. So I'm going to pause and I'm going to pull up the carburetor enclosure in the carburetor next, and I'll be right back. I should have mentioned this before I got done talking about the supercharger itself. This booklet right here, I believe you can see it completely now. If not, I'll add a still shot of it. This is a very helpful booklet if you're going to play around with these McCulloch superchargers that came on the Kaisers. This booklet's available, like everything, on eBay. This one I believe is an original. I got it out of Arizona 30 years ago from a man named John Parker, who was in the Kaiser Fraser Club. Nice man. I got a lot of equipment from him in the past. But anyway, this book is very helpful. I would recommend at least getting a reproduction, and I'd recommend reading through it before you started taking anything apart or assembling anything or installing anything on your car. Always do your research if you can. So I'm going to get the carburetor enclosure lined up so you can check that out. So this is the carburetor enclosure, and I have a carburetor in there, the correct one for the 5455 Manhattan, Kaiser Manhattan. So there were at least two different variations of the tops. This particular one, it actually says Kaiser 226 on it. It would be real easy to grind that off and smooth that off if you were putting one of these onto another vehicle, a different make, if you wanted to. I've done that in the past on other vehicles. The top of this unit does not have any kind of a release valve. But at some point, Kaiser decided, or McCulloch decided, one of the two, decided that they needed a release valve, and you can see it right here. I expect that was something to do with protecting something, the carburetor, something from when, if the motor backfires. That's the only thing I can think of. This is a Carter 2146S carburetor. It's the correct carburetor. I don't know what they actually did to it to survive inside the pressurized cover. This cover would be on. You operate the throttle from here. Your supercharged air comes in here via this rubber hose from the supercharger, and then it goes through the carburetor, mixes with the fuel, and goes into your motor. Now, earlier in this video, I said 7 psi on the McCulloch supercharger. It's actually around 4 psi. I forgot. I was thinking of another supercharger. I'll go back and either add a correction, there, or I'll redo that video. So anyway, so this is an expensive carburetor to find, and I don't know if you want to use a regular carburetor and try to modify it to the specifications or whatever this carburetor is. I'm sure it can be done. I'm not the person to provide that information. Somebody in the Kaiser Fraser Club could probably do it, or somebody that's rebuilding these old carburetors for a living could probably tell you what the differences are and what to do. This particular carburetor is a 2-barrel carburetor, and I actually had this came off from the Willys Jeep sedan delivery that I mentioned earlier that I restored, and it ran so good that when I sold the truck, I took this off and threw another carburetor on because this will go on to my next project. Of course, it's been 20 years, so one of these days when I get around to it. So the next thing I'm going to show you, I'm not going to stop the video, I'm just going to pull it over here, is the pulley. You can see the pulley here. There's a specific pulley. This one's number 746079. I don't know if you can read that, but this is the crankshaft pulley for the Kaiser Manhattan and with the supercharger. These get broken easy. I'll tell you right now, if you source one of these and they're going to ship it to you, implore them to package them well, because otherwise it'll show up broken. And also on the pulleys on the actual front of the supercharger, the variable pulleys are extremely brittle and they break. I've had them broken during transport because people just throw in a box of newspaper and they think it's good to go. So you do want to ask them to take care of your, really take extra special care of these because they're fragile. So the mounting bracket for the McCulloch supercharger for the Kaiser Manhattan is relatively simple. If the motor was facing you right now, this is the right front corner. Oh, that's not right. There we go. It goes onto the right, on top of the motor, on the right front corner, just like that. There's a tensioner arm that goes on here with a pulley, and I neglected to pull that out, but maybe I can add that later for you guys. But you would only really need this bracket if you're putting your McCulloch supercharger onto a Continental 226 flathead. If you're going to put it on some other motor, you're probably going to have to either find a bracket like this and modify it, or you're going to need to source the correct bracket for that motor. There are a lot of brackets out there, and it's kind of hard to. I've got tons of brackets. I don't know what half of them go to. One of these days I'll sit down and do more research, and I'll find out. So there are a couple the rubber products involved with the McCulloch supercharger installation on a 226. Pretty simple. You've got the hose that goes from the carburetor enclosure I showed you before to the back of the supercharger, so the pressurized air goes into the chamber. This goes from the supercharger to the air cleaner, and then you've got a drive belt. And this may not even be the correct drive belt for the VS57. It might be a Paxton, but I'm pretty sure it's the right one. Let's see how it fits in this pulley. I haven't messed with these in a while. I don't know, that fits pretty good, so it's probably the right one for the VS57. I don't think these belts are easy to find. So if you decide to do this, put one of these on, and you figure out what belt you need for your application, I recommend anytime you can find a decent used one, grab it. You don't need 7 of them, but I would at least have one good extra spare, because they're getting harder and harder to find. So the other thing I want to show you, which you probably wouldn't use this, it's the original air cleaner for the McCulloch supercharger on the Kaiser Manhattan. I believe it's a oil bath air cleaner. I haven't played with it in so long. I'm pretty sure it is. It is. Chances are you're not going to use this air cleaner unless you're actually putting your McCulloch supercharger into a Kaiser, a 54 or 55 Kaiser. And it may work if you were retrofitting an earlier Kaiser, 53 or 52. I don't know. I've never done that. But they may be similar in the engine compartment. The brackets might be the same, so you can use it. But whenever I buy a pile of parts, I invariably get air cleaners and such, and somebody may need this someday for a restoration of their Kaiser. I don't know. So anyway, thank you for listening to me and looking at my Kaiser McCulloch stuff. Again, don't forget that according to the interweb, the VS57 Kaiser supercharger only put out about 4 psi, not 7. Like I said, I'll fix that in the previous part of the video. Next up, I'm going to talk about distributor options for the Continental 226 flathead 6-cylinder. In going over the carburetor enclosures, I realized that I didn't hold them well for you guys to see some of what I was talking about, so I'm just going to do a little quick blurb about these again. On this one here, I mentioned about grinding off the name, the Kaiser 226 name. You can grind that flush and polish this housing, or any of them, if you're going to use them in a vehicle that's not a Kaiser. It might look better if you're doing this on a flathead Ford V8. You don't want Kaiser on there. So that's one thing that didn't show very well. And also on the top here, if you look at this, I'm going to pull it a little further for you. You can see that there's no vents up here. It's all smooth in one piece. This is an earlier version. I had mentioned I don't know why it changed to the newer version, which has this pop release valve right here. This valve, I believe it's because I think it's a backfire precaution thing if the motor backfires. But there may be another version of these too. I seem to remember there might have been another version with a different valve than this one. I can't remember. So I just wanted to try to make that a little more clear for you guys. And I'm going to try to edit this in and put it in where it belongs.